We're now moving on to take a look at the financing of Saudi Arabia's renewable energy strategy. And again, as we've heard time and time again, it's all very well having all these wonderful ideas, but we really must make sure that the financing is in place. And as many people have called it, they've coined a new word to make these projects get the investability back into the market. So this is absolutely essential. I'm very, very pleased now to have with us here a partner from Chadbourne and Park, the law firm, joining us here, a gentleman with extensive experience, of course, advising both developers and lenders in connection with the financing of power projects in the Middle East and Africa, and of course also in Saudi Arabia. So very, very warm welcome for Richard Keenan. Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you very much, and Your Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this afternoon's panel session on financing renewable energy projects in Saudi Arabia. We've got a fantastic group of panelists with us this afternoon, and I'm sure we'll have a very lively discussion. My name is Richard Keenan. I'm a partner with Chadbourne and Park. For those of you who don't know anything about Chadbourne and Park, we're a law firm. We're an American law firm headquartered in North America, in New York City, but we have offices all around the globe, including here in the UAE in Dubai, where I'm based. In terms of our panelists, on my immediate left, we have Roberto de Diego Arosamena, the CEO of Abdul Latif Jameel Energy and Environmental Services, or otherwise often referred to or known as ALJ. I think it's fair to say that ALJ, together with its subsidiary FRV, has really taken the renewable energy sector by storm in recent years. Their most recent and notable success, of course, is Phase 3 of the DEWA solar program. ALJ and its consortium partners, which includes Masdar, signed a PPA with DEWA in November last year for an 800 megawatt PV plant. And I guess, Roberto, you haven't achieved financial close yet, but probably are quite close to achieving that. It's hard to know also with there's so many records that keep tumbling in the PV sector, but I guess when this plant is up and running, or at least when the third phase is finished in 2019, at least for a period of time, it will be the largest PV plant in operation anywhere in the world.
Yes, it will be, but then the new tenders keep increasing the size, so that's going to go up. It doesn't necessarily mean that bigger allows you to achieve a lower price. So after a certain point, let's say 100, 200 megawatts, the economies of scale are not as much. So even though the prices will continue to go down, not as fast, even if we go to larger plants.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. Next to Roberto, we have Duncan Allison, the Head of Power and Infrastructure and the Deputy General Manager at SMBC here in the Middle East. I've known Duncan for as long as I've been doing project finance in the region, and I think Duncan's been doing project finance in the region a lot longer than I have. He's almost a financial institution in himself, and we look forward to hearing his views this afternoon, which he's never shy of giving. Next to Duncan, we have Paddy Padmanathan, the CEO and President of Aqua Power. I guess neither Aqua or Paddy probably need much by way of introduction. Aqua Power is, I think it's fair to say, one of, if not the most successful power developer in the region, certainly the most successful in Saudi Arabia by some margin. And in recent years, they've made a significant push in the renewable energy sector and achieved some stunning success, which includes Phase 2 of the DEWA program, which is under construction at the moment. I guess Paddy's probably scheduled for completion sometime later this year.
1st of May.
Yeah, and 1st of May.
Yeah.
And also, Aqua's had some recent success in Morocco with NOR 2 and NOR 3, the CSP plants, and some very significant recent success in South Africa as well. And that's all been under the stewardship of Paddy as the CEO and President. And then finally, I would also like to welcome Abdullah Al-Shaheri, the Governor of the Electricity Cogeneration Regulatory Authority. And we look forward to getting some of Abdullah's views this afternoon during the session as well. So without any further ado, I want to jump into the topics we have for discussion. So in terms of Saudi's renewable energy program, We've a couple of years ago we had a bit of a false start with the launch of the KA Care program and the shelving of that program, but we now have a very new and ambitious program that was, I guess, formally launched and announced by the Saudi Crown Prince last year. The targets they've set, I guess, are not as ambitious as the targets that the KA Care program set, but still quite ambitious. I understand it's that the target is for 9.5 gigawatts by 2030, and a more immediate target of 3.5 gigawatts by 2020. But then I understand there was a quite significant announcement yesterday by the Saudi oil minister, and there's a revised target, I think, of 9.5 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2023. I can see Paddy shaking his head a bit, so I may not have got those right. And I was going to start with you, Paddy, in terms of getting your views on those targets. Do you think they're real? Do you think they're achievable?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I was shaking my hands on, well, you kind of presented a particular picture, but for me, the reality, because we are part of, we're significantly involved in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, significantly invested in the energy sector, and we're significantly involved in renewables elsewhere. So we've been pretty much consulted, involved, so I'm very aware of how the program has evolved. Nothing got shelved, that's the first point. I think KA Care did a fantastic job of setting the scene, establishing what is feasible, outlining a kind of macro vision, if you like. So KA Care did a fantastic, and what they set out back in 2011, if I remember right, 2000, yeah, maybe 2011, 2012, if anything, is much more valid today. It was very correct at the time. Indeed, something like 40, 50,000 megawatts of renewables is perfectly deliverable, economically attractive in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, remains even more relevant and valid today. And nothing has changed. What you have seen and what the Kingdom has tried to do is take its time in developing a program that was going to end up being beyond just megawatts. I think, yes, we talk about green energy, which is very important, but when you start deploying at those levels of scale, I think it's extremely important that you also maximize value creation, value retention, industrialization, employment creation, all as part and parcel of that program. So it's taken quite a while for them to detail all of that out. So what you now have got is but now you're starting to get the details through. So very clear, ambitious targets are being set. So 10,000 megawatts, or 9,500 megawatts, operating by 2023. So that actually means within about 4 years, they'll be contracting. That's what 2023, you don't kind of do the maths quick enough. But in reality, that means contracting 9,950 megawatts of renewables from pretty much starting zero within 4 years. So that's quite a significant, ambitious program. And that is that's what they want to achieve. They want to be proud of if they get there. Doesn't mean that's the maximum, as even His Excellency, I think, the Minister has gone out of his way several times in explaining. So, and our belief, and I think earlier on somebody in an earlier panel said the same thing, as we start deploying and as prices come in, I think it is inevitable, just like in any other country, the program will get bigger, simply because we say, oh wow, it is so cost competitive. So the initial projects will be 300, now let me get this right, 300 megawatt photovoltaic and a 400 megawatt wind. And I think it is very clear that in the program, over this 9,500 megawatt program, yes, there will be significant amount of photovoltaic and wind, simply because that's the one that we can deploy fast, and that's the one that is such a clear-cut, cost-competitive tariff. But we remain confident that a certain amount of waste to energy, a certain amount of CSP, and a certain amount of even geothermal will get initiated into this, in even the phase 1 program. But definitely, as we go forward into the full renewables arena, all of these technologies will get deployed because the Kingdom does have significant resources in all of this.
Thanks, Paddy. Abdullah or Roberto, can you share any sort of further insights in terms of the targets that Paddy was just outlining, and also the way in which you expect this program to be rolled out in terms of technology mix?
Well, good afternoon for everybody, and thanks to Masdar for arranging this excellent gathering. I'm delighted to be here with this respectable audience. The growth in the electricity demand in Saudi Arabia is very high. It has been on the average 6 to 7% per annum over the last 15 years. The peak load last year reached 60,000 megawatts, and we expect this demand to double in 15 years. So by 2032, we expect the peak demand to be more than 120,000 megawatts. So the demand on conventional and renewables is there, and it's going expected to continue. The program of renewables in Saudi Arabia has taken some time, but the reasons behind this is to prepare things to be done right from the beginning. Currently, the restructuring of SEC is taking place, and one of the main elements in it is to establish the principal buyer, which will be the focal point of all IPPs or renewables. He is going to be the primary contractor with them. We want to make sure that the principal buyer is also financially viable. And if he signs contracts with developers or lenders, he is there, and he should be transparent, and everybody should have confidence in his performance. We are requesting SEC to establish an independent company called the principal buyer, and the president of the principal buyer was here a few minutes ago. So this is one element of it. The other thing is preparing the data required for any developer. And CARE, the Ministry of Energy, and Aramco has done an excellent job in preparing a map for Saudi Arabia regarding wind and solar radiation. For the project that was announced lately by the Minister of Energy, already 40 sites are prepared. They are ready for systems to take place. The interconnection to them is there. The technical and geological studies are there. So we are happy to have reached this stage of being ready to accept such developments. The investments in the electricity sector is not only in the renewables, but also in the conventional sources, as said earlier. All future power plants will be based on IPP contracts. The initial stages will be contracts with the principal buyer for capacity, and the energy part will be for competition in the market. They will compete with renewables and others. The government is in the process of correcting the financial situation of the electricity sector to make it financially viable. And we are also embarking on establishing the smart meters and smart grids, which will help developing the conventional and renewable resources. Lately, Saudi SEC, Saudi Electricity Company, has put forward a bid for 2.5 million smart meters. We have currently about 8.5 million consumers, which we need to replace all the old meters with the digital meters or smart meters. Plus, we are adding almost 500,000 every year. So we are expecting to add in the future more than 1 million smart meter per year to cater for efficiency programs, for demand-side management, for renewables, and for others. The other part of it is the tariffs for electricity is set by the government, and sometimes the tariff is not only based on economics and finance reasons, but also is based on social and political issues. And to make the flexibility there, we suggested to the government to establish what we call the balancing account. If the government approves a tariff which is less than the break-even cost of the electricity as a whole, then this balancing account will come forward and will support the principal buyer. So we'd like to see the principal buyer financially capable and being able to withstand all the contracts that he will sign with the developers. This is in a nutshell the overall picture, and we kind of
Many thanks,
Thank you.
Abdullah. Roberto, anything you'd like to add? We've had a fairly comprehensive assessment of the targets and the insights, but
Yes, there's a couple of things. I think the Saudi government has been very proactive in trying to understand best practices around the world so that they launch a program that incorporates those best practices. The other thing is the interest that they have in the creation of a local industry, I think would be best served if you don't tender one big project a year, because one developer, one set of suppliers, one set of advisors, and everything else will not create an industry. If you fragment it to the right level that will give you electricity price at a very competitive rate, maybe not the lowest rate, but actually facilitates the creation of an industry, if you fragment into 5, 6, 7 projects throughout the year, and you have different bidders participating there, and you have different suppliers for every part of the value chain, that helps the creation of a local industry.
yeah, that's a good point. I guess, though, with this new and very ambitious target for 2023, the projects are going to have to be of a fairly significant size. But I guess what you have in mind is sort of not maybe a sort of 800 megawatt, 1,000 megawatt project, but in smaller pieces.
Yes, I mean, you can have 800 megawatts in 4 projects of 200, which will be competitive, but will also create a better network locally. And at the same time, the world does not end in 2023 with 9.5 gigawatts.
Exactly.
Actually, we expect that going forward after 2023, the battery storage is going to be a big option here to be able to stabilize the signals into the network, but also to be able to address hopefully up to 24 hours of supply of solar electricity. Today we have done studies, we've studied more than 40 battery technologies. We believe that on a 6-hour basis storage, PV plus storage is already competitive with CSP. We expect that to improve going forward.
That's interesting. I just want to turn to the topic of pricing, and a question for you, Duncan. We keep seeing records broken in the PV sector. Aqua set a record when it bid for phase 2 of the DEWA program. That record then was since eclipsed by the ALJ Mazda consortium when it submitted its bid for phase 3, and then more recently up here in Abu Dhabi, the Jinko Marubeni has set a new world record. Does it concern you as a lender that we keep seeing lower and lower pricing in terms of maintaining, ensuring quality and performance?
No is the quick answer, but I think we need to look at that a little bit. This question always makes me smile, because this is where the world of the technical engineer who comes from Imperial College meets the world of the financial modeler whiz kid from the London Business School, and the two never understand each other. I think the answer to that question comes down to one simple point. It's critical that the advisors to the people launching these programs give the client a good understanding of what they're going to receive as the price of that electricity. Because there are a number of mechanics involved in this which can influence that pricing, which do not necessarily reflect the actual technical costs that are going into the bid. And therefore, it really comes down to a client concern whether they want to achieve it. I mean, for instance, there are different common assumptions. We have seen different tariff structures. We've seen different loading factors. We have seen different ways with which that price is calculated. So you're not comparing apples with apples. You're comparing apples with pears, apples with bananas. And it really doesn't matter, because as long as all the bidders are bidding on the same playing field, you'll have a fair tender. But the key thing is your client must be happy that of the figure they're going to receive. If it is really important to people to show the world you have the lowest cost, there are ways of achieving that, and they're mainly mathematical, and they're mainly to do with all sorts of things we can do with weighting factors and loading factors and heaven knows what in the assumptions, which have nothing to do with the technical costs. So it doesn't worry me at all, this chase. What worries me, I think, the firmness of the program, and there will be a very successful program in Saudi Arabia, and I confirm Paddy's understanding that I believe the first phase is 300 megawatt solar and a 200 megawatt and a 100 megawatt wind, is that the client fully understands what they're going to receive as a price, and it is clear to the bidders what they're bidding. And if they understand what they're bidding, then you'll have an open tender, and what the price is at the end of the day is basically going to be what it is.
Sorry, just want to add and point the obvious. Okay, so first of all, as far as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is concerned, over about a kind of like a 7 or 8 year period, over $30 billion of private finance has already come into the energy sector. Yes, it was for fossil fuel-based generation capacity, but the IPP models of contract, private sector participation, all extremely well established. This discussion around the tariff differences, absolutely right, yes, no. Duncan was referring to apples and banana comparison. In fact, it's not even apples and bananas, it's apples and meat and beef comparison. Because it's complete, it is entirely dependent on contract structure. So we talk about different resources levels, different resource from here to here. Then we talk about different credit conditions. Then we talk about different cost of construction in different countries. But there is also different terms of contract that needs to be taken into account. So all you need to do is to say, for 5 months of the year, I will pay you 60% more. Finished. The number is a different number that you've got. So that's what is driving. So what I can tell you now is two things I can. So long as you pre-qualify or post-qualify your bidders or your selected party, look back in the IPP and IWP program of this region, which has been around for over 20 years. Very, very few. In fact, there was, to the best of my knowledge, I think there's been only one project that didn't achieve financial close across all these countries in this part of the world. Everything got done, and the one project that didn't get done was at the height of the Lehman collapse and the financial crisis, Raza Zoo, as it was called. That's it. Everything else has been done. Stunning. We focus so much on the renewable energy tariffs. Go back and look at the fossil fuel-based tariffs that has been delivered in Saudi Arabia, many of which, yes, my company has delivered. Stunning tariffs, the lowest ever in the world. The lowest ever oil-fired power plant tariff is in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on an IPP project. The lowest ever gas-fired power plant tariff is also in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It's all working. They're all working fine. We as a company make money. Our contractors come back and work with us again. So it is perfectly economically viable. It makes business sense for the participants. All we are doing is we continue to capture value as the technology cost comes down, efficiencies improve, construction methodologies improve, risk gets better understood. And, okay, by the way, just be clear, it may not be all just one way. Interest rates are at the lowest possible levels we have ever seen, or they were, but already have started to shift. So the base rate has already changed. Now, and there is liquidity tightening up in this part of the world. So we will expect to see interest rates starting to go up now, adding cost. So the question for renewable energy is, can the improvement in efficiency, reduction in construction costs, more confidence with operation and maintenance costs starting to reduce that cost, will all of that outweigh what is inevitably going to be an increasing financing cost? And in renewable energy, financing cost is much, much more significant than in conventional energy, simply because it's so capex heavy. So in a PV tariffs, 30% is financing. So that's the issue going forward, I think.
Thanks, Paddy. To finance all these projects, we're probably going to have to tap into new sources of liquidity. What are your thoughts? And this is a question to each of you on the panel, or those who'd like to answer it. What are your thoughts on the potential for financing or opening up the financing of IPPs in Saudi to project bonds?
You've put two questions in there, and I think I'd like to separate them, if I may. The world of the financial world has changed drastically in the last 2 years. I mean, the common belief that, you know, all you had to do was write a nice PowerPoint presentation, send it out to 14 banks, and then pick the 14 responses and look at the 4 lowest, and thank you very much, that's my financing, and I'll send you the invoice. Unfortunately, that world has moved. Paddy has already indicated, talking about liquidity constraints. There is liquidity to fund these programs. They can get done, but it's over a range of different liquidity sources. And my answer to that question specifically is, you again comes back to what Roberto talked about, because sizing of the projects, frequency of the projects is the critical size. Now, if you're going to go for a very big project, then you are going to need to access a very particular type of financing, and in particular, you probably are going to bring in Asian ECAs and Chinese funding. If you're going for smaller projects, then you have a broader range of possible financing sources, and the commercial banks will be there, and we can have a discussion on mini-perm and long-term financing, which is a separate subject. But it is important to think through, you know, exactly what you're doing, because it's not just a borrowing situation and a lending situation, it's an equity situation. Because if you go for a very big project, how many equity shareholders can actually do that amount of equity? And you come to a lending subject, if you're going for one massive project, and there is one massive project out there, I can tell you it's going to have, there are only 3 potential sources of funding that could do it, and the number of bidders who could do it is probably only 3 or 4. Or if you go for lots of smaller projects, much broader exposure, etc. But it's a policy decision. Now, when I talked about equity, I'll take the second part of your question, because it's quite important. What is the importance of what bonds? Now, a green bond. Lots of definitions of green bond, but basically the easiest one is that you issue a statement to your investors that it will only be used for renewable purposes. But the key thing here is that it actually is the same risk. We're still looking at whether the project can pay back. And bond issues will be used, are going to be used particularly on the equity side. And I'll stop there, because actually a corporate bond may be a solution for a number of parties on the equity side, to raise a war chest for doing these projects. If you are looking at the other side of the fence, which is doing, everyone talks about the government of Saudi Arabia, fantastic issue, it's a phenomenal success. But that was the government of Saudi Arabia guaranteeing that they were going to pay back the bond, government risk. If you're trying to do it as a project bond, which says we'll only pay you back bondholders if the project works, that's going to be quite tricky. So I think the bond solution may lie more equity side than actually for the project itself. It's a refinancing tool once the project is up and running. Once the project works, once it's running, once you can demonstrate what it's going, then it's time to go to the bondholders.
Harry?
Look, just a quick comment on that. Yeah, I agree. I think traditionally that's the way bonds have worked in the world. And in this part of the world, we haven't utilized. I mean, it's a very untapped market in this part of the world. There's a huge amount of Islamic financing that is available that can be structured as sukuks. And then there is a significant amount of international insurance, pension funds, these kind of institutional monies, very, very, very high net worth individual monies that are looking for investments of this nature now, at last. So these are different pools of liquidity that are there. We've been doing some research work on it in the last, particularly in a very aggressive way in the last 6 months. We have discussed, I have discussed myself maybe with about 40 different entities around the world, collectively who control maybe $10 trillion worth of money. I think out there the view is different now. They are willing to look at debt side as well for bonds. Proof of the pudding is in the eating, and I don't know at what price. So we've got to develop all those details. But at the moment, I think simply because there's a lot of money out there, and they're all looking for investments in this very low interest rate, even though interest rates are starting to go up, it's still very, very low interest rate environment. So in the quest for investments, they are now starting to open up their minds and embrace the idea of even project bonds, not just equity bonds. So we believe it can be done and it will be done. Huge amount of capacity is needed, so I think we're going to have to tap the full range of liquidity pools. But I am not convinced. I mean, maybe as in the context of Vision 2030, maybe as we get into year 2025, we may start hitting buffers on private sector's financing. I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? It's too difficult to predict. But we do not foresee, for the scope and size of the entire sort of 2020 transformation plan, not just even power and water, but for schools and but for airports and everything else. I mean, it's a massive requirement, but we're not convinced that that should be an impediment. We think there is a huge amount of excitement and appetite. And indeed, the Saudi Arabia sovereign, while you're right, it was underpinned by the government promising to pay back. The huge amount of liquidity that ran after that $17.5 billion is just an evidence of that.
Thanks. Are we out of time? Oops. Do we have time for any questions? No. Okay. Well, that's unfortunate. We only got through about half the questions I had, but we have run out of time, unfortunately. So could I please just ask you to put your hands together for this panel, and thank you very much.